Hello and welcome to another macro video. I'm going to be looking at FRedit today, and having done some training this morning with a couple of colleagues here in Norwich, one of them asked me could I go through a typical FRedit list to show him the sort of things that I do. I was reticent because I have been using FRedit for 14 years now, and therefore some of the stuff I use is fairly high powered, and I didn't want to frighten him too much. Anyway, I thought, well, maybe I can put something on video so that you can look at it and take it at your own speed and decide whether you want to look into it or just ignore what I'm saying or move on to something else. So I'm going to do just that. It's worth remembering that we've got the FRedit library, which has got a whole pile of different bits of scripts for all sorts of things. You can look through it, you can search electronically for the sorts of things you want to use in your FRedit scripts, and so that's there as a resource rather than having to sort of get everything from scratch. So don't forget that. And there is a video list, so if you're wanting to follow up any of these things, I'll be referring to a number of videos, a number of macros. So if you want to take that further and learn about the macro, then you can use the video list, because any given in the list of videos, it refers to the individual macro names. So if you want to know, is there a video about footnote add or multi-file text or find same place, then you can use this list to find the video that relates to the macro you're interested in. Right, so let's have a look. Well, it's my normal ending notes that if you have any queries, then just email me. So we can get rid of that for the moment and bring in a typical, well, I say typical for me after 14 years, FRedit list. I have a kind of standard FRedit list that I can load up just by pulling this standard one here, and it has all sorts of things in there that I might want, so then I can get rid of them if I'm not actually going to want them for any given document. So like these words here are things that I would have a UK version or I have a US version going one way or the other depending on which country I'm working with. So that's the kind of standard one that I would load up and then add things to that or take things away from that. So if you look at the beginning of that, then it's got these notes at the beginning, which are what FRedit uses to decide whether to search and find and replace the text that's in text boxes and or footnotes and or endnotes, and so those are there in case I want them. But you can see from that one what I did was I just shoved a space in there, because FRedit will see that line and will not recognize it as me saying do find and replace the footnotes or the endnotes. So this job did have some text boxes, so that's why that one is still as it were intact. I mean, I could delete those, it would have the same effect, but the track equals yes is the item I put in there so that the job requires track changes, and therefore that will remind me when I try to run this. If I try to run it on a file, can I do that? Yeah. If I try to run the FRedit list on that, I have to get rid of this FRedit list, otherwise it'll get confused with more than one FRedit list. So it's no, it still can't do that. It's got other things which are probably FRedit lists. Yes, it's got the FRedit library. It's spotted that. So right, it says please switch track changes on. So that's a reminder to me when I start to run the FRedit on chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 or whatever. If I have not switched track changes on, then I can go back, switch it on, and then run the FRedit list again. So that's the first few lines there. Now, just a reminder that you can, from within the FRedit list, you can run macros, individual macros. So in this case, I'm running several macros before I use the do the main find and replaces, and you'll see at the end of the find and replaces there are a few more that I do at the very end of the sequence. So there's a job that has equations, so I'm doing a macro to highlight all the equations so I know which bits are equations and also what type of equation they are, because there's different ways you can create equations, so it's helpful to me to know how they were created. Equation strike through, that is, if this is a general thing about FRedit, if any text within the document is struck through, then FRedit will ignore it when it comes to do find and replace. So the equations may need to be struck through so that when I do some of the find and replaces, it won't then change the equation, so they are protected from any find and replace. Fields unlink, that is saying that things like where the figure citations are linked to the figure number, they might have active links within the document. I don't want those. I want real live, well, just in the work I do anyway, I want actual text which says this is in figure 3.2, it shows blah blah blah. I don't want any links in there which can sometimes upset the file. I need to remember that I'm using a UK document in this case, so that I want the language set to UK just in case it's not. Auto list off, that's when you've got automatically numbered lists, then when I'm editing, I want real live numbers, not the automatic numbering, so that will switch those off. This is an IZ job, so I run the macro which changes the IS's to IZ's. What's this one? Table space before heading. Oh yes, when you are later on I do things with headings, and if a heading occurs immediately after a table, then the find and replace I use, which is going to look for caret P and then something or other like you know, the numbers of the section for the heading after a table, then it gets confused, it can't find it. So all that macro does is to add an extra blank line after every table, so that the heading that follows the table is actually recognized properly by the find and replaces I do later on. Bit technical, but it's just a minor thing. Okay, so what have we got here? Now you'll notice that these have got text on them there, and if we've got, have we got the FRedit? No, I haven't. So let's open the FRedit list. Sorry, the FRedit library again. So you'll notice that if I do find same place, it finds. Oh, that's not quite the same one, but in other words, this wording here may well be there because I've found it from the FRedit library. So that some of those things are the sorts of like multiple returns, multiple spaces and things. I've pulled them out of the library, and having a comment in front of it is useful as a reminder to me as to what these things are, so that when I'm looking at them and saying do I want them, if that's, you know, it's the sort of standard FRedit library, FRedit list that I've got, you know, in this job, am I worried about this one? No, I don't want that, so I don't want that particular one, so I can take that out of the list. But having the words describing what the FRedit item is means I don't have to look at it and say what the heck does this do. It's for if there is a single space at the beginning of a line, so there's some text on the line but there's a space in front of it. That's normally an initial capital. So if there's a space there, then this one will remove it. Multiple spaces before, multiple tabs before a carriage return. In other words, tabs on the end of a line we don't want. Multiple spaces before a carriage return. In other words, multiple spaces on the end of a line can be deleted. Multiple tabs before a carriage return. Oh, it's the same thing. Oh, well, never mind. There's a duplicate there. Okay. So what we've got next? Okay, these are where the section heads have got hierarchical numbers like 3.4, 3.5, and then 3.4.5, 3.4.6, whatever. A heads and B heads. And in the work I do, well, generally, you have to have the coding, the A for a first level heading, B's for second level, C's for third level, and those are wildcard find and replaces. And again, you don't have to work those out. Those are available in the library if you need them. So automatically putting in those A's, B's and C's is going to save quite a bit of time on a job where you need to insert them. Multiple spaces before punctuation. Yes, okay, so sorry, after punctuation. So if you've got a full stop and then a couple of spaces or whatever, exclamation mark or a question mark, and there are spaces afterwards, they can be returned to a single space. Pairs of spaces. Now this one is a little bit funny. Well, not funny, but it needs a little bit of explanation. So I need a sample file that I've got here. So what I'm saying is that in some texts you get from authors, they've actually used lots of spaces in order to space something out. So if you use a straightforward, remove any multiple spaces back to a single space, then those will disappear, and the fact that the author had put them in to try and space something out, you lose. Okay, when you get to this, you know that you've got to replace that with a tab or whatever to deal with it. But what I decided was, if there are two spaces within some text, then those clearly need to be changed to a single space. But if there are multiple spaces, then those I don't take them out, because when I come to read the document, I'll see all these spaces. I know that there's something there. So if you put the switch on the visible formatting, you can see that they're all those spaces. So I have two items in the list there. This one which says that pairs of spaces should go to a single. That is, never mind how it actually works, but it's saying not a space or a tab, then two spaces, a 32 is a space, and then not a space or a tab. So if I just copy those two and go up to the top and pop it in there, stick a hash, then I can run the FRedit list and it'll just run those two there. So if I run that on this text here, okay, so what it's done, it's used, that's blue, so when I'm reading the text, I can see, because of these two W's here which are in blue and the Y, the E and the Y there that are in blue, I know that it's taken a double space out. That may not be relevant, but at least you know something's happened there. And then what it's done here is that it's highlighted the multiple spaces, so it's made them even clearer to me that there's something funny going on there. They're not tabs, they're spaces. Why did that? Not quite sure why it highlighted that and didn't remove them, but anyway, that's by the by. Okay, so that was that one. So if I go back to where I was, which was there, yeah, spaces, tabs on the line ends, This is messing back with fig dot should be figure in the job I'm doing, and then this is adding the tag in front of the figure, but it could be that a paragraph begins figure 2.6 shows blah blah blah, and that will have a cap on it. But at the very end, if I just whiz down to the bottom, yes, there it is, at the very end of my FRedit list, then when I've messed about with the whole finding and replacing, finally I've got a thing which says if it starts with a cap and then it says figure so and so shows something, then take the cap off. That just tidies that up. So if I go back to there, okay. Don't worry about all this lot with figs and tables and spaces and goodness knows what. I can't even remember how I did it, but it was an author that did all sorts of funny things. Look, you see, sometimes there was a space before the number. Sometimes there was a full stop after the number. It was really all over the place, and so it was worth my while to spend time working out how I could go through and deal with all these different permutations and combinations of full stops and spaces and tidy them all up. But often that isn't worth doing, but it is possible to do, and I did it. I can never see any point in putting a comma after e.g. and i.e., so I'm afraid I take them out. What have we got here? Oh yes, initials. In this particular one, the convention I decided after running Dockerlize, I was going to go with initials with full stop but without spaces, and so these will remove the spaces. So the first one is for 3 initials, and the second one is for 2 initials. Highlight any tabs at the line start. Yes, if there's at the beginning of a line there's a tab, sometimes it's useful to see that there is a tab there. Straight quotes to curly quotes. Yep, that's very straightforward. These are the funny things, 2 of the funny things that people use instead of degree symbols. That's a funny what is it? That's a hexadecimal number for a Unicode. The job I had a weird Unicode character which was used instead of a normal degree symbol, and so that's what these funny things are. That was again, and it had 2 different ways of Unicode characters. That anything which is F0 something, those are from what's it called, symbol font. This lot, you don't need to worry about those. If you have that sort of thing, you can get it from the library, and in any case you remember watchar. If you click on a given character and run watchar, then it will tell you that's a wingding, and it's ampersand HF095. So those sorts of things can easily be picked up by using watchar if you find them in your text somewhere. The way equations are set up need to be I can't remember why I did that. Anyway, but something to do with the equation numbering, meter squared, kelvins, the different formatting of those I needed to change. This is one which I find quite useful. It highlights any immediately repeated word like the or that or can. But even if there's a punctuation mark in between, that can be useful sometimes. Particularly if it's on a line end, the number of times you see the on the end of a line and then the again at the beginning of the next line, well, this find and replace will highlight any or all of those, so that when you see a word that's in pink there on the end of a line, you think, ah, hang on, and you find that you've got the at the end of one line, the at the beginning of the next. List numbering. Oh yes, this author had sometimes used numbers with brackets, sometimes used numbers with a single bracket, and so these were ways of changing them all to number and a full stop. Superscripted hyphens, those are probably going to be so it was a superscripted hyphen and 2, so it was meant to be to the -2 in a technical document, so they're probably going to be minus signs. Number ranges are fine, but you in some of the work I do, you've got BS numbers and they have hyphens in them, and so you don't want that to be changed into an N dash, so you blank those off by just sticking in a pad character, a non-breaking space there. Then you run the number range find and replace, and then you take the pad characters out later on, I think, or something like that anyway. But that's again in the library, in the FRedit library if you need it. M dashes to space N dashes, fairly standard there, space dash space. Yes, if you've got multiple spaces, then it deals with that as well. Again, the author was using 2 angle brackets to mean very much less than and very much greater than. Equations, oh, that's just a specific finite element, blah blah blah. Thin spaces with units. So again, this is again certainly in my standard list. Whether these are in the FRedit library, I'm not sure, but I like to have between the number and the unit, I like to put a thin space, and that's for all sorts of different units and things. These were specific things to do with the job, that these words did not want to be in bold, but they did want to be in italic. Then we're on to some of these standard words that are in my sort of standard. So here we've got the UK docs and US docs. So I mean, I've put a pad character in front of those, but I could really have probably should have deleted those. And then we're beginning now to get to the section of my list which has come from the spelling error lister, where there were spelling errors that it detected, and so I've put the correct spelling in each of these customs and sort of a customer and all sorts of things there that were thrown up by the spelling error lister. Proper nouns, again from proper nounalize, there were various proper nouns that needed either highlighting, and I like to use a font color rather than a highlighter unless I really want it shoved in my face like this one, because those were quite see there's an E there and an A there, so I needed to I think these were probably ones where I couldn't find out by using by just googling these names. I couldn't find out what the correct spelling was, so I probably sent a message to the author to say, could you tell me which it was, and therefore in the meantime I wanted to highlight them as opposed to just make them blue, so that they would stand out and make sure I caught it at a later time. Yeah, nothing terribly exciting there. Then from hyphenalize, there was loads of stuff where I wanted to change the hyphenation. I presume you're gathering that these are all struck through, because I'm saying I don't want these changes to be tracked. I just want them changed in colour, so that as I'm reading through I can see that they've been changed, so that I know to just have a look and make sure I'm happy that they really should have been changed. Yeah, this is a neat little trick. The number of times people say ensure something when they actually mean ensure that something happens. If you want to ensure the solidity of the structure, that does not want a that, and so when you're reading, you want to know, you want to be told, I'm going to ensure that something happens as opposed to ensure something. So I like to put that in to make it easier to read. However, if it's already got that in it, then I don't want it drawn to my attention. So this is a trick that I use where that will highlight it in pink, so that that will highlight every ensure. But what this does is it changes the colour of ensure that from whatever it is to dark blue. That line there looks black, but actually it's dark blue. It's a colour, and so it won't look any different from any of the rest of the text. So it won't be drawn to my attention, whereas this one will be drawn to my attention. Section without a capital S, chapter without capitals, I just highlight those just to make sure that I don't miss that I sort of, it draws to my attention whether it should be capital or not. Vol dot, number dot, how do we do those? Amid, amidst. These are the CO2s with the I want those down. I don't want those to be proper CO2s or whatever. So that's done with find and replace. ST and RD, I don't like the superscript ones, or my clients don't. I don't like these actual symbols which are funny characters. So if I watch that, it's what I've called a dodgy font symbol.
Dodgy squared symbol.
So
Superscript.
It's dodgy square symbol, superscript. Superscript.
Dodgy cubed symbol. Superscript.
I want to superscript. I wanted to change it from the dodgy symbol to a real 2 or 3, and then make it superscript. So that line has to be superscripted. So the whole of the find and replace is superscripted to say, do this find and replace, and make it superscript. Spaces before punctuation can be taken out. We're nearly there. Look, we're on to the end. Highlighting the eds. Yes, I'm never quite sure what. I need to deal with those when I get to them. So, and there was that one we looked at where the cap was taken out. If it said cat figure so and so shows, that's obviously not a caption. That's obviously going to be the wording at the beginning of the paragraph that's got an anomalous cap on it. Then a list. Please give me a list of all the Vancouver citations. Please check them. Give me a list of all the citations and the captions for the figures and the tables and the boxes, so that I can check first of all if the number sequencing, if all the numbers are there in the actual captions, the full sequence of numbers, and then whether every single one is cited or not. If some are not cited, then I need to put in something like figure so and so shows blah 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 somewhere in the text. Full point on captions. Yes, this is an odd one where the client wanted a full stop at the end of every caption. So I wrote a little macro which added a full stop to every single caption, and so then I call that macro from the I did it at the end because earlier on I was messing about with the figures as the spacing and the full stops and whatnot. So paragraph end checker, that's one that I like. It's very easy if you've got a paragraph that doesn't end with a full stop. You may not notice that. So if I ran paragraph what was it called, paragraph end checker with this document, then that character there would be highlighted, not coloured, would be highlighted in green, and so with that one to make it stand out when I'm reading. So I do notice that there isn't a full stop on the end there, so I can add it. Actually, just finally, at the end of my standard FRedit list, I've got a load of those are the that's just there just to say, right, that's the end of the list, You only need one to actually stop FRedit from going any further. These are odd bits and pieces of FRedit lists which I sometimes need while I'm working, and so I just put them in here all together, and then I can pull them out when I need them, and use them at different times, so that they're ready for me. That's quite useful. I have that on the end there, because if I select that and run wildcard find, it won't find the wildcard there, but if I run it, see if it'll work on here. If I say find next, yes, look, it finds angle bracket A and B and C. So that's just a useful little find and replace that I actually use manually. So I use wildcard, what's it called? Instant find down wild, so that allows me to just go to my FRedit list and just say instant find wild, and then I can go through and I can look through all these codes in the text. Yeah, I think that's about it. That's enough for now. I've gone on for far too long, but I hope you found it useful, and give me a shout if I can answer any queries, or if you've got any new ideas for macros, or any other videos you want me to produce or whatever. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye for now.